Okay, let's get started with this little photo over here that I'm going to open in develop mode. Okay, so we're in develop mode and we got this amazing photo on this foggy day of this lonely, lonely boat. Um, this photo just like screams to have a little bit more edit done to it. And we can we can get you know, there pretty quickly without doing anything fancy, but just increasing contrast, right? So this is probably the first edit that anyone does on their photos. You add a bit of contrast to this flat image, and now the separation between your highlights and your shadows is pretty big. And all of a sudden, a photo that was very, very flat, all of a sudden you can see all the corners, all the, I mean, when, the edges of colors and stuff, which is really nice. But we can always take things a little bit further. So I'm just going to reduce my overall. I think this photo could be helped by shifting its geometry slightly. It's a little bit tilted. We're falling a little bit to our right side. So I'm going to open the geometry tab here in develop mode and develop tools, and I'm going to use the rotate and straighten slider and move it slightly to the left until I can see that the line of um, the water here kind of matches the straight line above it. Okay, so that's all good. I don't have to click done. I just got to go back to tune and that will be applied. So now we have a straight image, a very clear straight image. Dean already, oh, you're getting there. I mean, what does dehaze does? So obviously this photo, there's a lot of fog in the photo. And if we bring dehaze to the right, it's almost like this little magic trick where you can all of a sudden the fog kind of leaves the image. We start seeing a lot of detail in the water, particularly. However, some of the fog does add a good atmosphere to our image. So we're probably going to add a little bit of dehaze, but not too much, just to bring a bit more color to the photo itself. Mm. Okay, so how can we take this image further with some of the new tools that you can use in 2025? Well, let's open the masking panel. And clearly our subject is this tiny little boat here. So let's create some separation between the boat and everything else. The easiest way to do this is to select your objects button on the AI masking tab and just draw over your boat. So this tool is exclusively for 25. If you have 24, you might get away with subject. Let's see if that does the trick. But as you can see, you have some selections here on the top, which remember, anytime you use any of the masking options that we have available, you can add to your selection or take away from your selection with either the left click of your mouse or the right click of your mouse. So in this situation, if I right click and paint over the hills here in the back, you'll see that the red areas start to disappear. Thus, I am removing from my selection. And my boat here is not perfectly selected. So what I can do is, again, with the brush tool, I can probably add some smart brushing in Magic and then just brush over. Maybe we'll do color, just brush over the boat here so that we can completely select it. But anyways, let's go back to object selection because it's definitely the easiest way to do this. We're just going to draw over a little boat. And now that our boat is really well selected, what we can do before we do any adjustments to the boat, what we want to do is to create the separation is probably bring the exposure of our background, bring it down a little bit. So after I've selected my object, I can duplicate this mask by going right here where it says duplicate the currently selected mask on the left. And now I can bring my new mask and invert it. And so right here, you will see the invert the currently selected mask button. And after clicking that, now I have everything but my boat selected. I can now hide my mask and start playing around with the exposure. So just like I'm going to bring it slightly. I mean, it's still minus 70, minus 60. That's a lot. Um, but as you can see, now there's a big separation between um, the boat itself and the rest of the image. Like my eyes are more naturally inclined to look at that boat quicker. So let's apply again some geometry. Let's increase contrast of our overall image a little bit again to get to where we were. So only with those adjustments, we already have a really nice image. My boat is clearly popping more, but maybe it's a little bit too much. We don't want things to start looking unnatural. So that's good. I can go back to the boat itself by changing my masks here. So now I have selected the background mask, and now I have selected the boat mask. All of your masks will be stored right here. Maybe I can increase a little bit of the clarity of my boat and maybe a little bit of its contrast as well. Not that it's going to be such a dramatic difference, but you know, everything helps. So what else can I do? Let's create a bit more contrast on our background. And how can we do that? Well, we can select the darker tones of this image and bring them a little bit and make them a little bit darker by using a luminance range mask. So this is also available in 25. And what you have to do is to go here to the menu to the left where it says add a new mask. And now I'm just going to add a luminance range mask. Now, if I want to select, for example, my trees here, what I'm going to do if I bring my mouse and I hover my mouse over this area, you will see that there's a little vertical line over to the left where the luminance range controls appear. So if I hover over my mouse to this little boat, you will see that that vertically dotted line is closer to the whites, obviously. If I bring it to the water, it starts going to the middle because that's really close to the midtones of my image. And if I bring the dropper over to the trees, it's going to start to go into the darker areas of my image. So if I wanted to only affect the darker areas of my image, I have to drag my top tab to the left, and we're going to look at our mask so that we can see how this starts to shift. We'll bring everything closer to the dark areas so that we can only affect the dark portions of our image or the darker portions of our image. The tabs that you have on the bottom, basically what they do is they smooth out your selection. So if I bring the bottom one 100% to the right, you will see that now there's like a gradient being applied to the selection. And if I bring it on a right angle, right at the same level, then the cut between the areas of brightness in my image is very, um, precise. But it's always good to add a little bit of feathering to achieve a more natural look. Okay, so now, thanks to this luminance mask, I only have selected um, part of the darker areas of my image. And this is going to naturally create a little bit of a vignette. So I'll go ahead and hide our mask by clicking the button Show Mask and reduce the exposure. And now all of a sudden, and probably add a little contrast. And one thing you're going to notice is that you don't have to do a lot to achieve good results. I feel like the image in its entirety needs more saturation, so I can go back to the General tab here on the bottom and drag the saturation to the right. We can apply a little bit of dehaze so that the fog that we can see in the middle starts to disappear slightly. And maybe reduce our trees even more, just a little bit. And so I went from having a pretty bland image to, increasing a lot of contrast, reducing areas of the photo that I precisely want to affect by using the luminance range mask. I've also added quite a bit of saturation to bring some of those blue colors back into the frame. And now I can go ahead. The cool thing about everything is that you can always go back to the masks that you have created and adjust them even further. Because as you learn, sometimes when you do new edits, you want to kind of like go back again. And so, for example, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to alter my luminance range mask just a little bit like that to achieve a better look. And there we go. Let me know if you guys have any questions so far before we move on to our next image. Something that you don't have to do, but it can help to add a bit more of, because this photo is, it's a moody photo, right? There's a lot of atmosphere to it. We can add some color LUTs, which will alter the color science of our photo completely. And as you can see, and the difference between a color LUT and a filter that you can find under effects, where you'll find the photo filters, is that the photo filters is basically you're adding like a layer on top of your image that is just, affecting it all in the same way, versus the color LUT will go into every color and adjust it in different ways. So it's good if you want to achieve a more professional look. And so I kind of like this elegance color LUT, but it's a bit too strong. I like the purple that it adds, but if I click on this little arrow here next to elegance, I can reduce the opacity of it and blend it with more of with how I have it originally. So let's take a look at before and after. It's a dramatic change. Something else you can do is add a little bit of vignette. So you just open the post-crop vignette here, bring the strength to the left. If you move it to the right, you'll see that you're doing the opposite. You're creating white on the edges. If you bring it to the left, we're darkening our edges. You can change the radius to expand it outwards or inwards. We probably want to go inwards on this one. because our focus is a little boat. And there we go. We went from a pretty flat image into a nice, contrasty, colorful, strong image. We are going to click done. And the beauty of it all is that we don't have to save this image as a new file because all of our changes are non-destructive. So as long as I click done, ACDSee will apply the changes, but it won't override the original file. So if I wanted to go back and undo everything, all I have to do in develop mode is just click reset to defaults up here. And that will bring everything to how it was. All right. So I just clicked cancel so that I can save all of my edits. And now let's open another photo. Tom says dehaze is sort of a contrast adjuster that cuts through fog and haze. I actually use it for a lot of other images as well, as I like the contrast effect of it, definitely. Now, this is a sweet, a really nice image that could definitely use some editing. And right off the bat, if you want to sort of figure out a way to direct your edit, is kind of establish maybe like an objective, which is, for example, there's at the end of this path, this wooden path here, there's a lot of light and a lot of green, and we kind of want to bring attention to that part of the image. And you'll find that what we're going to do now, which is to apply Radial Mask. This is available in 24 also. So anyone who has ACDSee 2024 can apply a Radial Mask. I'm not sure if 2023 probably also. So what we're going to do with our Radial Mask is we're going to draw attention to this area of our photo. And the way we're going to do that is by reducing the exposure on all of we're probably going to reduce exposure, reduce clarity, maybe reduce a little bit of saturation on everything that's around our selection. I mean, we're selecting everything that's red, what's outside the circle. To make it feel more natural, we're going to increase the feathering slider so that it's a smoother transition between what we want our eyes to focus on and the rest of the image. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hide that mask, and I'm going to bring the exposure slider to the left. And now we went from basically, I don't want to say like 2D to 3D kind of edit, but we definitely changed the perspective of this photo just by adding a radial mask. It's just, you can achieve so much with doing so little. So now we went from, a nice image to actually a image that is starting to create a bit more of maybe a feeling on the person who's looking at it. Okay, so what I did is I created this radial mask, and all the red affected areas have been reduced in its exposure pretty dramatically. Now I can also reduce clarity, which will reduce the details that you can see, which it's not gonna like create a blurriness to it, but just a little bit. It's almost imperceptible. You won't be able to perceive it well, but that's okay. Now I can bring a bit more saturation to, and maybe a little bit of contrast to the area where we do want to bring our attention to. And to do that, all I have to do is to duplicate my mask. So with our masks selected, we're going to click on the bottom left here, duplicate the currently selected mask. Now, huh. Oh yeah, so we've duplicated the mask and now we need to invert it. So um, invert the currently selected mask, and now you will see that the red area is covering only the area where we want to bring attention to. And here I can increase saturation. I think I could bring exposure down slightly and maybe a little bit more contrast. Oops, that's too much contrast. Not heavy on the adjustments, just slight adjustments that really um, make a difference. And so that's a pretty straightforward edit that we can achieve using radial masks. Now, it's always good to continue editing and try to play around with the overall image when you feel you've um, been able to attack those particular areas correctly. And so I've just added a bit more contrast to the entire image. And maybe I'll reduce the clarity over the entire image as well, because sometimes you'll notice that um, too many details end up looking a bit harsh. So if I increase the clarity slider, you're probably not going to be able to see the difference. Maybe if I zoom in, um, it starts becoming super harsh. And if I reduce clarity, all of a sudden it's less contrasty, smoother. And so don't be afraid to reduce the clarity on your overall image because it's going to produce a softer, um, more pleasant image. Again, we can play around with color LUTs. Elegance is one of my favorites. So is film. Oh, but golden seems to work really well on this one. So I've selected the color LUT golden, and I'm going to reduce its opacity so that it's just a subtle change. Why don't we go ahead and create more vignette to bring more attention to the lighter part of our image. And there we go. That's another edit where we've transformed a pretty flat photo into a more interesting, more author sort of heavy, um, there's clearly been an intervention in this photo, but if that's what you're trying to do, then that's um that's totally possible. Let's try to do instead of these dramatic adjustments that we've done, let's try to make more subtle adjustments and try to keep the natural aspect of our image um more, so to speak. So why don't we open this really beautiful photo here? And we're gonna go ahead and still gonna apply a lot of edits to it, but they're all gonna be really subtle. And we're gonna see how just by adding very subtle changes, um, we're gonna be able to create a very different image. Okay, so maybe I'll bring its geometry slightly to the left because I think we were a bit tilted to the right. There we go. And now, right off the bat, I want my greens to pop a little bit more. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the color range mask that's right here. And this is also available only in 2025. Now, you will see that another eyedropper opens. And with this eyedropper, you can go ahead and start clicking on different areas of your photo to select specific color ranges that you can affect. So this is another way of selecting parts of our image very precisely, which can be so effective when you want to do small adjustments to specific parts of your image. But we all know that. So let's go ahead and continue. Now, you'll see that I have my greens fully selected, but I still have some selections here on the hills, maybe a little bit on the water. So if you want to make sure that you're only selecting the greens that you want, you can always play around with the wheel itself that you have here on the left. So if I drag the center of the color selection that I have here and bring it outwards, kind of around there, you will see that all of the red area disappeared from our hills, meaning that we've only selected um, sort of the trees and shrubs and grass of our photo. Maybe I'll bring it up slightly more so that we can select a bit more green. And now I will hide my mask and I'll increase saturation and exposure. And so now my greens have become a lot more alive compared to how they looked before. So this is how they were before, sorry, and this is how it looks after. Maybe I'll add a little bit of contrast, and that's pretty good. Oh, so what's the difference between the color mask and the color wheel? So the color wheel is sort of this tool inside the color mask. Masking is just a selection. So we're achieving a selection through color, and the color wheel allows you to fine-tune that selection. Okay, so I can see that my sky here is looking a little bit dull, and I can probably um, make it stand out a little bit more. So let's go ahead and create a new mask. This time we're going to use select AI, select sky. So there we go. ACDSee has been successfully able to select the sky. What if we add a little bit of contrast and saturation to bring those blues into our image? Probably reduce exposure slightly. And one thing you'll find when you start messing with skies is these sort of lines that appear on the edges that start looking a bit pretty much unnatural, obviously, but there's a way to fix that. And we can use the mask refinement options that are available only in 2025, where we can shift the edges of our sky. So if we move the shift slider to the left fully, you will notice that the selection of the sky has retracted a little bit. So let's play around with different values to try to achieve a more natural selection of our sky. So -8 is too much still. What about -3? -3 works a lot better than 0. So I am shifting my edge with a -3, retracting my selection. I won't apply any feathering because the cut is pretty straightforward. What if I do -4? Even better. So let's go back to the full size of my image here. and I'll just maybe apply just very, very subtle feathering to my image. So now you can you can see how we've brought our sky to life, so to speak. We added a ton of saturation, maybe a little bit too much. Um, yes, yeah, totally. The mask refinement options in 25 with the feathering just it's a game changer compared to what we had in 24. So what else can I do? Maybe I can I can bring more attention to my greens by maybe adding a radial gradient over here and lowering down my exposure, maybe adding a bit more contrast to my mountains and maybe some saturation as well. So how do we select those mountains? Um, why don't we try a new, why don't we try, so one way that would be helpful in all versions of ACDSee would be again to do a radial gradient mask, and you can create sort of like a little circle that goes around here. That is subtle. You can also do color range and then deselect. It'll probably won't be able to select any of my sky because that's a big difference in color. So let's see. It is selecting my sky. What if I bring this down? That's a little better. It's a hard color to select. So what if I, instead of doing that, I create, what if we do luminance again? Okay, let's take a look. We're trying things here. So I'm only trying to select, yeah, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. I am going to erase what I don't want with my right click. I'm still trying, I guess, trying to figure out the a way to not fully select my mountain, but just like, and that's pretty good. And so exactly as Tom is saying, obviously I have some of my here grass area selected, but what I'm going to do to just leave it onto my mountains here is I'm going to right click on this mask, which is a luminance mask, and I'm going to convert it to a brush mask. So it's important that whenever you want to create some edits to convert to a brush mask. So now with my right click, I can deselect my grassy areas. We'll put the pressure on 100. And so we've started to deselect our floor, so to speak. Now, what if I add more contrast to those mountains? It's starting to look a lot nicer. And maybe that's too much. So there you go. We've added 3 masks, one for our greens, where we increased exposure, increased saturation. We have another mask that we applied for our sky to bring back the details. And we have another mask to select our mountains here. Um, and now another thing I can do is I can just kind of maybe add a new And here's the thing, you can totally keep going, right? And so I can add a radial mask selection here on the bottom just to increase brightness to this whole area of the river and the greens. So the radial mask works in the way where, like, when you're selecting your circle or your ellipsis, it'll actually select the outer part of it, so you always have to invert it. And now, as you can see, we have we have inverted our radial mask, and we can play around with that to maybe increase, again, very slightly, some saturation, some contrast. And so that's how our image looked before, and this is how it looks after. A much nicer image. I don't think, because of we're trying to achieve a natural look here, I'm not going to add either a vignette or a color LUT. I'm just going to leave it as is. I'm going to go ahead and click done. And that's it. Let's see. By the way, if you guys have any questions, just let me know. Rodrigo, are you going to go to edit mode? Let's go to edit mode. Um, I have to admit that develop mode is my favorite way of editing photos. Edit mode is really awesome when you're trying to work with layers and add some overlays, or even, for example, changing the sky. So let's go ahead and change the sky on a photo, right? Because sometimes our skies are boring, or they could, they could be a little bit better. So let's try to see how that workflow would work. So I'm going to select this image here, and then I'm going to open it in edit mode. There we go. So really nice photo. My subject here and whatever is happening on the bottom is clearly more of the focus of the photo. So I think changing the sky is definitely something that would help the overall feeling of the photo. So let's just do it. So when you have your photo open in edit mode, and this is available also in 24, you have to go to your filter menu options here and select the sky replacement. Okay, so now the AI sky replacement is finding our sky, and it immediately has changed it for a new sky. Already it looks great, but you can always check different skies to see what you like more. You can change the scale of those skies. You can move it horizontally, etc. You have mask refinement options to shift the edge if you realize that the edges in this particular photo is amazing. The edges are incredibly well achieved. So if I zoom in over here and you look at the difference in the trees, that's pretty good. That's awesome. I think I have some questions. Edit mode. Is there a way to, when you select sky, to turn off reflections? So if you have water, ACDSee and sky replacement will automatically select those reflections, but you can always deactivate those selections here. So at the bottom of your sky replacement tool, you will see reflections on and off. And right now we don't see any reflections because we have no water. So hard to see any reflections on the pavement. Marv says, can you show again how you went to sky selection? Yes. Just gonna click cancel. I have my photo open in edit mode, and you can either go to here on the top, you can go to filter, AI, sky replacement. Or you can go straight to sky replacement if you have your filter menu on the left already open. Greg says it does not stay unchecked. Well, that's interesting. It should definitely not behave that way. It might be he might have found a little bit of a bug there. So let's go back to I actually like this guy. Maybe we will move it to see. And actually, I feel like the light is coming from the left, and you can see like the shadow of our skater here. The sun should be on the right. So you can always flip the sky. And I will flip it right now, just like that. Now the sky is pretty awesome now, but I feel like it's taking away a little bit of the attention. It's too cool. So you can always change the opacity of that sky to make it a bit less prominent. I feel it should be a little bit more bright. And there we have it. Now we have a pretty natural looking sky added to our photo. We can go ahead and do more edits, but I feel we got it to a really good place. We're going to click done. And here's something that I recommend you to do is to use both edit and develop mode. So once you've done the edits that are, like intense edits, like changing the sky, Misty, if you have a question, you can just type it on the chat. That's the easiest way because I have the chat open here and I can see, but I can't really access the questions while I'm editing on the software. So just go ahead and ask in the chat. Okay, so I can bring this photo to develop mode if I want to go ahead and edit how I was doing it. And ACDSee will ask me, because edit mode is destructive, it will have to save a new version of this photo, and that's okay. We're going to go ahead and click Save As. And we're gonna say landscape, this landscape 15, we're just gonna say sky, and we are going to save it as a TIFF file because TIFF is how we can save a photo with no compression at all. So uncompressed, basically the same amount of information that I have in my original raw image. So all of the images I've been editing today have been raw. Are those horse apples in the lower left, and can they be removed? Yes, they can absolutely be removed with a shovel. Okay. Okay, so well, we've saved our photo, but maybe we'll attempt what Randy is suggesting. Maybe we'll try to get rid of those. So to do that, and I'm pretty sure that Adam did a workshop on this last week, or maybe he's gonna do it um, coming soon. I'm not quite sure. Okay, so if I go to the repair tool in edit mode, I'm pretty sure this is also available in develop, but we'll stay in edit mode. It says right click on the image to set the source point. And so to get rid of the poop or the apples, we have to first select the source of where we want to take information from. So this is nice because the sand area here is pretty, it's kind of an easy object removal surface because it's really kind of the same everywhere. So if I right click right here to the side of it, and then I left click on top of the apples, you will see that now they are gone. So again, if I right click where I want to grab information from, and I usually want, I should have zoomed in. Let's try everything again. Undo. Okay. I'm zoomed in. Um, Again, so we're gonna click on the heel tool right here under repair, and we're going to right click right next to where we have the object we want to remove so that we can take information from that area and start applying it over. And ACDSee will create this sort of like combination um, with what we had before, so that the effect looks a lot better. And you can go crazy. Um, you can start obsessing over removing details, right? But there we have it. No more apples. And then we click done. And now we're gonna open back our image in develop mode to see what we can do. Oh, sorry, Greg. Well, yeah, sometimes Zoom does funny things with how the way that I'm showcasing the edits. All right, we'll save that image again as landscape sky. We're going to replace it, and that's okay because it's a TIFF file. We're not losing any information there. And now we can go ahead and maybe let's try to first apply some general adjustments to our image. So we're going to open the general tab here and increase a little bit of contrast. Um, and I think I do want saturation, but not really in the sky. So how do we add saturation only to the bottom of our photo, leaving our sky alone? The easiest way would be to obviously select our sky. And then we would want to invert that selection with the invert the currently selected mask button right here. And now we have only the bottom area of our image selected. So that's great. And we can now increase saturation only in the bottom area of our photo, which I feel we needed. And maybe a little bit more contrast. And now our photo starts looking a lot better just by being able to edit a specific part of our image and not the sky. We could even take some saturation out of this guy if that's what we wanted by duplicating the mask and inverting it once again. Maybe there. We could even decide to, let's say, enhance the yellow line here on our street. And the way to do that would be to simply add a color range mask. We're going to click Show Mask and select our yellow. Did I say green? I meant yellow. So now that we've clicked, that's a good question, Doug. I'm not quite sure if the EXIF data is retained, but I can take a look and you can remind me of your question on the community and I'll get back to you if you send me a personal message. By the way, if you guys have any questions that you want to particularly ask me, please send me a private message on the community because sometimes it's hard to follow everything that's happening there with all of the posts that we're having, which is great, but it's a challenge to stay up to date with everything, all the information that's there, which is a good thing. Okay, let's get back to our edit. And we've tried to select the yellow here on our road, but we've obviously selected a lot more information than we might not want. And so to perfect our selection, we're just going to bring the color wheel, the center of our color wheel, we're going to bring it outwards. And now you'll see that probably if we keep going, we're going to start deselecting the yellow of our line in the middle. And that makes sense. It also makes sense that those yellows are also present on the sides here. And once again, if you want to make sure we're only affecting the yellows here, we can convert this mask by right-clicking on it and clicking on Convert to Brush Mask. And with the right click of our mouse, start deselecting whatever is not the yellow line on the road. So there we go. We've deselected everything but our yellow line. Now we can hide the mask and start playing around with its brightness. So now we've increased its exposure a little bit, and we're also going to increase saturation quite a bit. Make it really stand out. That's cool. So that's before and after. Let's try an experiment. I want to see if AI object selection is able to select my skater. Voila. That's pretty amazing. Again, that's only available in ACDSee 25, the ability to select objects by drawing around them. Um, it's okay if it's not perfect. I'm just going to make my subject slightly a bit brighter so that it can pop a little bit more compared to the rest of my image. I can even duplicate this mask, invert it, and now I'll be affecting everything but my skater. So if I bring the exposure down, if I'm extreme, obviously it's going to look terrible, but if I do just like a slight adjustment there, I can create more separation between the subject and the rest of the photo. And there we go. I can always go back to the general treatment of my photo, which is great. So I'm going to, I think we went a bit too dark, so I'm going to increase the exposure a little bit back. Maybe add a tad more saturation. Maybe even play with the white balance to make our image warmer. So what if we add vignette? It's a bit too much. And what if we had a film LUT? And now all of a sudden we have this sort of like Breaking Bad-esque kind of photo to kind of feeling to it. And it works really well. So I added the film color LUT. I'm reducing the opacity around to 30. And that's how our photo looked before, and this is how it looks after. Very different. Before, after. Yeah, you can do a lot of stuff with Light EQ. Again, there's many different ways to go about your edits, and this is just one of the ways. Um, I'll go ahead and click done, and I'll want to compare. And I guess we're only 3 minutes away from finishing, so I'm going to compare this photo with my original photo by going back to manage mode right here. I'm going to click my new TIFF, which is the one I've been dealing with in develop mode, and my original raw file that's right here. Right click, compare images. I'm going to fit both images. So fit image, and there we have it. Yeah. So awesome new tools in 2025 that you can apply to your photos. You can select whatever you want and just create small adjustments. Increase the exposure, add a little bit more saturation to the things you want to draw attention to, and play around with light. Radial masks are an amazing way to direct attention by making some areas of your photos darker compared to the other areas of your photos.